All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the start of our day here at GDC 2023. I have to say, much better turnout than I expected, so thank you, I appreciate it. And it actually highlights one of the things that we were talking with the people putting the GDC together this week, the fact that this GDC is on track to be somewhere between 25,000, 30,000 attendees back to pre-pandemic levels, which is just amazing. And seeing you all here today in the room really kind of reinforces that. So excited that we're back in full force. Today, what I want to do is share with you just some insights and some data that we are sort of tracking here at Xsolla. You've got a good overview of what Xsolla does. And we work with a lot of different game companies all over the world. And we're very fortunate that we work with big enterprise companies, mid-tier companies, indie studios, and we work with them across all segments of the market. So it really allows us to see, get a sort of a behind-the-scenes look at a lot of things that are going on. So that's what I want to dive into today, sort of share some of the things that you may not be thinking of, just to give some additional insight, maybe spark some new ideas, provide some actionable insights that can help you with your business. Before I do all of that, though, I want to talk a little bit about Xsolla's values, and the reason for that is it frames or provides context for what we'll be doing through the rest of the presentation. So with Xsolla, we really have these values of longevity. You know, how do we help our partners have longevity with their games, really succeed over the long haul? Opportunity, how do we provide opportunities or open up access to new opportunities that you may not be thinking of? And vision, share with you some things that can really spark vision and make you think of how you could take your business in new ways. And then finally, enjoy the game, right? We are here, it's a game business, it's interactive, it's fun. We always want to make sure that you're enjoying the game, and that is where the title for this presentation came from. With that, I'll start stepping forward. A little bit about myself, and again, this is only for context of like, well, who is this guy? Why should we even listen to him? Where is he getting his insights from, besides an amazing team supporting him? Well, I've been in the industry over 20 years, making games. Started off as a developer and started off designing, got into producing and production, marketing, business development. I've been very fortunate to see this industry from all different sides, and now at Xsolla, seeing it from kind of the fintech commerce side. Things that I do like to share and talk about with people, which you can always come and talk to me about, video games in general, fintech, strategy, publishing. And then finally, I am still a gamer. I probably shouldn't, but I still play 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours a night. So I'm a very avid gamer, love it, and I just love sharing this industry with everybody. And that's why I'm up here. So to move on, we'll start off with where have we been? And the format of this is we're going to take a little retrospective of where have we been, and then take a forward look at where are we going? What are the trends that we're seeing? And all of this will be supported by some data, some insights that are drawn either from the broader ecosystem or from data and insights that we actually have internally ourselves. So where have we been? Well, I'm going to talk about the macroeconomic situation and how that's impacted the whole industry. Talk a little bit about something called the decline stage, which is kind of a technical term of where industries go throughout their life cycles. It's not as scary as it sounds. And then talk a little bit about direct-to-consumer, which is something that we've seen working really well, especially over the past year and a half. All right, so first, macroeconomics. What the heck? So this is the part of economics that's concerned with large-scale economic factors, such as interest rates, national productivity, things like that. We're all familiar with what's going on now. Interest rates are going up. That's having an impact on the industry. But what kind of impact does that actually mean? When you hear that this is happening, how does that impact you? Before diving into that, we'll talk a little bit about what I call the boom-bust-boom cycle. And this is part of macroeconomics. About every 15 years, there will be a cycle where there's been a period of boom, of incredible growth, of a lot of opportunity, and that'll be followed by some sort of bust. And that happens on a fairly regular basis. And a new boom-bust cycle, I believe, began last year when people were starting to be fearful of recession. Please come on in, grab a seat. And so I think we're kind of on the precipice of that right now. So what does that mean? How does that impact your business? What can you do to sort of stay steady through this period? Well, first of all, during bust times, you'll see that companies start to shift their focus to defending their margins, right? Money gets expensive. So first of all, what does defending your margins mean? Well, it means that they start to look at what are extra costs that they can stop, that they can sort of get rid of to protect whatever margin internally they have as their metric. Back when I used to work at Activision many, many years ago, we started with a pretty small margin and had a goal of getting it up to 20% over time. And that meant that there was a lot of, during the times of growth, it was great. It was easy to build that up, launch more products, hire more people. When times got tough, we said, okay, we want to maintain the 20%, so that means we're going to have to lay people off, do different things like that, look at incremental ways to generate revenue, all of that. And that's kind of an opportunity, that incremental ways to generate revenue. So when you're thinking of companies are looking to protect their margins, they're also looking at new ways to generate revenue that they may not have been interested in before because they just didn't need to, right? Think life was good. You didn't have to think about these incremental things. Money gets expensive. So what do I mean by that? It means that interest rates are up, money gets expensive, it's hard to get investments, it's hard to get loans because the cost of those have gone up. It also means that the people giving that money shift what they're looking for. And that's sort of point number 4, where investors, the banks, the VCs, all of that, they shift from looking for companies that are high growth, that may be losing money, right? Doesn't matter, growth at any cost. They're shifting to companies that are profitable, that have steady revenue streams, and we're seeing that now. And why am I sharing this? Well, because that impacts the type of investments that are made. It also really puts pressure on companies that may have been funded a couple of years ago with an initial round where the investors didn't care about profitability, they just wanted growth. And then that company pursues a growth strategy, needs additional capital, and all of a sudden the capital is dried up. So one of the things to look at when you're working with other companies or you're looking at people to partner up with is I would recommend understanding what was their investment thesis initially. If it was a high growth investment thesis and they're not profitable, then you have to ask yourself, is this a partner who's going to be around in a year or two, right? Because they're not going to have access to capital. Versus, this is a partner who's pursued more of a profit approach to building their company. Okay, I'm comfortable partnering up with them and they'll be here with me. And if you're a company that is in one of these states yourself, you need to think about how do I shift so that I can get access to capital and resources during this sort of bust part of the cycle. Obviously, layoffs are part of it. I talked about that. One of the really cool things is the final point, and this is a little thread that we'll have throughout this presentation, but the fact that bust cycles are amazing forcing functions for innovation. And this is where you really start to see a lot of innovation happening as companies are forced to think of new ways to succeed, to tap into that incremental revenue that I mentioned, and actually grow their businesses during tough times when the normal course of action just may not be as successful or providing as much growth as it originally was. So during the boom times, when things are great, these are usually kicked off by some sort of new disruptive technology. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through. They provide new business models, right? So it's really important when things start to take off, and we've seen this again and again, when things start to take off again, companies that relied upon old business models often stumble, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute, this is a boom time. Why is this established company stumbling? Well, because they're using an old business model. They're not thinking about there's a new disruptive technology, what are the new business models that might work better with that technology? Also, money becomes cheap again, right? So companies tend to shift back into a growth at any cost mindset and growth over profit. So it shifts kind of how you present your business to investors, how you pursue your go-to-market strategies. All of that really can be impacted by whether you're in a boom or a bust cycle. So a brief bust-boom history, all right? So our first little overview of some interesting data points or some interesting analogies. The first one that I'm going to reference began in 1981. And back then, interest rates, many people may not even have been alive back then or were just born. Yeah, Sally, 1981, representing. So interest rates were around 17%. It was catastrophic. It impacted so much of the economy. But coming out of that, around the same time in 1981, we had the introduction of personal computers that took off, and they heralded a whole new cycle of boom, where the economy turned around, took off. Personal computers had just a all-encompassing impact upon our productivity at work, at home, at everything we did. Then in the early 90s, as President Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy, stupid. The economy started to tank again, and everything was getting much more difficult. We had another macroeconomic issue with recession and with interest rates in the economy. But coming out of that, we had the global internet, right? Al Gore, takes credit for inventing the internet. But that kind of popped onto the scene at the time, and a whole new boom cycle took off, right? And where would we be today without the internet? It's the foundation for the business that we are all in. So amazing new technology to come up out of this sort of bust boom cycle. And then, as every 15 years or so, early 2000s, we had the Great Recession. Banks going under, home prices getting ridiculous with interest rates, just a horrible, horrible time, right? Well, at that same time, we kind of introduced the smartphone era, and a whole new realm of economic productivity and benefit took off, and again, impacted our industry in a very big way. And one of the things that's interesting here when you're thinking of these cycles and these new technologies, especially when they apply to the video game industry or the games industry writ large, is the fact that these new technologies, they're not wiping away the previous market or piece of the games market. They're actually stacking on top of it and bringing new users in. And I believe that this is kind of how our industry is able to continue growing, where we have a foundation of an older technology, personal computers, PC games, right? Created a good market. Then the internet came along, and we had online games, multiplayer games, MMOs, just all of that. That didn't wipe away the PC segment. Sure, it took some of it, but it actually layered on top and brought even more players in, right? Created a larger ecosystem. Smartphones, same thing. Online games, PC games, still around, robust, doing great, but smartphones brought in this amazing mobile market and all these new players, all these new users. So again, these bust boom cycles, they can hurt and they force a change in your business practices, but the light at the end of the tunnel is they are a great forcing function to bring a new technology in that grows our industry. And then of course there's a blank spot left here. So where are we now? Early 2020s. There's a great fear of a recession. Interest rates are going up. There are macro things happening geopolitically. So the world is kind of on edge. And lo and behold, there's this amazing new technology that is kind of coming right on the heels of this with generative AI, which I think, obviously, it's a hot topic here this week. I think we all understand it will have an impact, and it could be that next sort of technology that brings us out of a bust cycle and grows not just the economy, but grows the games industry in ways that we may not even be thinking of yet. Okay, so we talked about bust and boom. Let's talk about decline stage. This is a kind of a technical term. It's the final stage in a product's life cycle or in the economy, sort of a stage of a boom-bust cycle. And this is when sales are dropping because maybe the original need has disappeared or business models are changing or there's another product or innovation that's coming on the scene. So why am I talking about this? Why do I say we're in a decline stage? Well, we're looking at declining sales for video games for the first time in a very, very long time. US video game spending dropped 5% in January of 2023. China's games industry shrank for the first time in years. Now, that arguably is attributed to the fact that China kind of put a hold on a lot of game publishing and game development. But doesn't matter. The end result is the market still shrank. Game sales in the UK also slightly decreased in 2022. So we have a period of declining sales, and that is one of the hallmarks of entering a decline stage. And then if you look at the global market by segment, console, mobile, right, we had declines across all of it. This is a report from Newzoo from last year. You saw that in total, the market of our industry dropped 4.3% year over year, and that decline was really led with mobile, browser games, right, console games, they all went down. But interestingly, PC games, download games, they went up, right? So there was a little bright spot there. So do with that as you wish. You know, it's just as interesting. As an old-time gamer myself, I always hear people say the PC games, that's dead, that's an old market. Well, it's nice to see it's actually, you know, had a little bit of growth. And it's also important to remember that even though we've had this little decline, that it has happened against the backdrop of an explosive period of growth right before it. So there's a dip, but it's still trending upwards from where it was pre-pandemic. And then if you look at it by region, and this is something that I'm going to expand upon a little bit further when I talk about the trends and things that we're looking at, I'll dive into some of these regions to talk about the opportunities. When you look at it by region, you'll see that the big markets, North America, Asia Pacific, Europe, they all declined, right? They all had a decline year over year. But what I want you to think about is emerging markets with Latin America, Middle East, Africa. These markets actually grew. And I think this is an opportunity area that a lot of people haven't really been looking at, but I would definitely recommend turning an eye towards these emerging markets, whether it's for distribution of your games or your products, finding development talent, finding new ideas, new games that might be coming out. There's a lot of opportunity there, and I'll back that up in a few minutes. Mobile game spending, as I mentioned, it had a slight dip, so there's been a lot of, I think, chatter around, you know, what's happening in the mobile games market. Is it dead? Is it going away? Well, we know some of the factors have come from just changes around privacy rules, the impacts on mobile advertising, how that's changed user acquisition and made it much more difficult to acquire users the way that companies had been previously. It was something that companies have now started to talk about in their annual reports, the impact that this is having on their business. So this is something that we view as kind of, it's not doom and gloom for the mobile industry, but it has been a forcing function for them to start looking at, okay, our margins are declining, what other things can we do that perhaps we weren't looking at in the past? And I'll talk about what those things are in a moment. But just one last note here is talking about viewership in general. It's just another indicator. Interestingly, the Twitch viewership over the year has dropped 6% over 2022 to 2021. Still, a phenomenal number of viewers are streaming on the platform, amazing amount of content, and interestingly, the revenue, even though the viewership dipped a little bit, the revenue actually increased a little bit. So some inferring there, you could start to infer that perhaps the dip was due just to people that may not have been that engaged anyway, but you're left with a good cohort of highly engaged viewers that are really engaging with their content creators. We're also seeing content creators start to look at even themselves. They're thinking, how do I protect margins in my business? And they're looking at ancillary ways of generating revenue, which opens up opportunity, right, for working with them through drops, as you saw in our video, or promotions or merchandise or other things like that. So opportunity, I mentioned, is one of our values, and we always love to look at when there's a data point, what is the opportunity that comes out of it? So here, as I said, you're seeing viewership decline a little bit on Twitch and streaming platforms. So maybe there's an opportunity to open a door that would not have been there before with some of these content creators and streamers, because they're going to be a little bit more interested in finding new ways to get that viewership back up. Okay, so one of the things that we've seen working, I talked a little bit about boom bust, right, decline stage, all of that. So that's what's been happening. What we've seen working against that backdrop is an increase in companies pursuing direct-to-consumer strategies. And that's the business model of selling your products directly to your players, right, to your consumers. and bypassing third-party retailers or wholesalers or platforms. And I'm not saying that this is a strategy that it's not an either-or strategy. It's an incremental addition to a business where platforms may not be providing the value that they used to be. You've maxed it out, whatever. Going direct to consumer allows people to develop a new sort of base of players, develop closer relationships with their players, and actually utilize e-commerce tools and practices to really grow their business. So why is it important? Why are people going direct to consumer besides the incremental piece? Why is it actually working? Well, part of it is there's more gamers. Even though we've had this decline in revenue, we've had this overall macroeconomic situation, we're still seeing more gamers year over year than we have before. So what we take away from that at Xsolla is this is opportunity, right? It's opportunity to go direct where there's more people than there were before. There's a larger audience for you to connect with. The declines are coming on the platforms that are making it more difficult to connect with that audience. So why not spin up something where you're talking directly to them, building your community, getting to know your players, because there's more of them than ever. So it's a great opportunity and a real sort of reason, a good validation or a reason to go direct. All right, so one of the ways that we're seeing companies do this, and this has been one of the biggest success areas we've seen over the past year, we've seen an increasing number of mobile companies that are adopting direct-to-player strategies through the web. Whether you call them web shops or web portals, whatever you want, they're putting content up on the web and driving players to that. And we're seeing more engagement through this than was expected, and I'll get into some of the data points on that. But Tilting Point is an example of a company that's done that. They've done it with Star Trek Timelines, with Warhammer, Chaos and Conquest. There are dozens more that are out there, but they've done a phenomenal job of doing this direct-to-consumer strategy with their mobile games and bringing them over to the web. And it's more than just throwing up a simple store on the web. If you do that, you're probably going to fail. What it is about is putting something up on the web that creates a sense of maybe community, you have a hub, it creates a sense of value, like, oh my gosh, I can go here and get things that I can't get anywhere else. And we really see an opportunity to build these hubs out even further, provide additional content, additional value to players that they can't get anywhere else. And some of the ways that they've done that Tilting Point has, is they've done exclusive web-only bundles, right, where it's really difficult to do bundles on platforms, but if you have your own web portal, you can bundle up different items, even different games, items across games, all kinds of stuff. Higher value offers, and what do I mean by that? Not just getting more of whatever the resource is that you're selling to the player, but actually offering higher price points. We have seen companies that, and I know the App Store just recently opened this up, and we feel it was in response to what we've been seeing. We're seeing companies that are driving users to their web portals, and they have bundles that are $10,000, right? Amazing, and it's working. People are buying these, they're spending on them, and because there's a great value that comes with it. So it's a great way to increase value, not just through the offers, but through the revenue that you're generating. Discounts, greater discounts, that's always a good thing. Everyone loves the discount. Exclusive deals, that's a really powerful thing. And then exclusive deals that are backed up through a limited time offer cycle. So one of the things that Tilting Point does is they offer a Monday and Friday cycle of limited offers. So an offer will go up Monday for a limited time, and then it's refreshed Friday with a new offer. So it really creates a sense of urgency that helps bring players back to the web shop. And now let's get to some of the good metrics, right? I said there would be stats and data, so here's some data. First of all, we're seeing that 45% of the revenue that some of these web shops or some of the games are generating is coming from the web shop. So that means if they're making $100 total through the game on the App Store and the web shop, 45% of that, $45, is coming from the web shop. That is phenomenal. This is an amazing amount of revenue that people really aren't considering, and it's not just detracting from overall revenue, right? It's not like, oh, well, we just shifted that revenue from one platform to another. It's actually increasing overall total revenue. Another stat here is that 80% of purchases of players who made a purchase via the web on one of these web shops come back and make another purchase. 80%. Again, that is just a crazy statistic. So part of that is because these companies are able to offer these cycles, like limited time offers, cycles, exclusivity, higher value. And so the players are recognizing that, and they're checking in more frequently and saying, yeah, you know what, this is great, I'm gonna make another purchase. 5 purchases per month. So one web shop paying user on average is making 5 purchases per month. Again, a phenomenal statistic for those of you out there working in the mobile space, looking at the number of purchases your users are making on mobile. This is just a great, great number. And then 35% of those users are actually making more than 10 purchases per month. This is just, I can't get over it, just the amount of volume, the amount of value that these are generating. And I'm talking about web shops, but this can be extracted writ large to think about any direct-to-consumer offering that you have. And the reason that we're able to do all of this is because there's a whole host of tools and techniques and marketing things that you can do to drive people to a hub on the web and actually increase engagement and therefore increase sales even outside of your game. And then we're seeing a phenomenal 40 to 60% conversion rate of players that go to a web shop. So when they visit this web shop, they're not just hitting it and bouncing. 40 to 60% of them are actually converting to spending players. And then that loops back to, once they do, they're gonna come back and make more purchases at a very high frequency. I will say that with these examples, this is from a mid-core game, right? So there will be, the numbers are even better for core games, casual, a little bit different. But the point is, there is amazing opportunity that we've been seeing from the partners that we're working with and the industry friends that we've been talking with over the past year. And all of this came because we were entering a bust cycle, and these companies, for the first time ever, had to think about, how am I gonna protect my margin, right? Because my core business just is not performing the way that it has been, so that led them to this new opportunity, and it's been a win-win for everybody. All right, so where are we going? Talked a little bit about where we've been. Let's talk about where we're going. And this is going to be based upon, again, the data, the insights that we see at Xsolla, working with thousands of game companies of all sizes, from research that we do and our own internal data. So first of all, I'll go through sort of where are we going. There's like 4 different points, and then I'll go into details on each of them. Emerging markets. I'm gonna talk a little bit about emerging markets. As I mentioned earlier, when I put up sort of the market share by region, we saw that Latin America, Africa, Middle East were growth areas. I'll dive a little bit more into that. Then I'll get into talking about the consolidation phase. What does that mean for our industry? This is something that also tends to happen during a bust period. You see consolidation. I'll get into that a little bit more. Talk about artificial intelligence, obviously hot topic. How is that impacting our industry? And then finally, a little bit about cloud gaming. I know that topic is kind of hit or miss with people, but I'll share why we actually think there's some opportunity there. So first of all, emerging markets. What is an emerging market? That's a market where it's the economy of usually a developing nation or a developing region that's becoming more engaged with global markets as it grows and there's more opportunity. So new territories, new audiences. So here we go. We'll talk a little bit about Africa. We have a friend over at the CEO of Interactive Entertainment who feels that, his quote here, at a corporate level, Africa is seen as the next consumer market that needs to be developed. Growing interest from major platform players, Microsoft, Xbox, Nintendo. I would also say that there's a growing interest from the investment community. There's a large fund, Lightspeed Ventures, and hearing Moritz talk about that, part of their mandate is to look beyond the sort of what had been very Western-centric investment thesis and start to look at emerging markets to deploy a significant part of their investments. So this is something that we're also hearing from the investment community, which can be really good when you're thinking of how do I grow my business. If I'm trying to open up maybe an additional studio or something like that, follow where the money is going, and that will help you. So, Africa, young, mobile, loves games. So, younger gamers. By 2050, it's estimated that Africa's population, the majority of it, will be less than 24 years old, right? Over half of the audience, or the players, will be less than 24. Rapid adoption of mobile phones. We're seeing a great, quick adoption of mobile phones. Over half of the population in sub-Saharan Africa, that would be about 600 plus million people. The population is about 1.2 billion. But half of that, 613 million, is projected to own mobile phones within the next 2 years, right? That's explosive growth. And then an increasing access to game tech. So more and more people in sub-Saharan Africa, as they get access to the phones, to the technology, younger mindset, more comfortable with using technology, we're seeing not only are they playing games, but an increased interest in creating games. You're starting to see even influencers and streamers coming out of emerging markets that had not been there before. So it's a young, fast-growing market, getting into mobile. When I worked at DreamWorks Animation back in the day, and we did kind of a review on regions with television screens, right? And why did certain regions not perform when we were putting movies out for DVD or for whatever? Well, we found out that a lot of emerging markets, the people at home, they didn't have a TV, right? We take that for granted, most of us, but you look at India, Africa, a lot of countries, there's no big TV in the living room. But these markets have kind of leapfrogged that TV stage and gone to mobile. Everybody is getting mobile phones. So another thing to think about with emerging markets is not just the opportunity, but what are the use cases of technology within that market, and how can you best engage with that? So African gamers buy more, and they buy more often. So what do I mean by that? Right now, we see about 290 million in total gaming revenue in just South Africa alone, and that's projected to reach more than double, 561 this year. Explosive growth, adopting the technology, and then spending through that technology. And they're buying more often. In 2022, our partners' games revenue, and this is some of our internal data, across Africa increased by 35.4%. That's a massive increase between 2020 and 2022. We also saw the transaction count, the number of players that were making transactions, increase 43%, 43.1% during that 2-year period. Growth, right? And obviously backed up by people spending. This is a great opportunity. And as I mentioned, opportunity, it's not just Africa. That was one example, but there's whole continents of opportunity. Middle East, North Africa, big growth. Our partners generated nearly 15% more revenue between 2020 and 2022 in the MENA region, and the transaction count went up 33.3%. Fantastic, right? Asia Pacific, our partners generated over 100% more revenue during this time period, with 97% increase in transactions and an increase of almost 30% in the number of paying users. When we say Asia, we're talking not just about China or Korea, South Korea. We're talking about Asia Pacific, right? Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, all these other countries that are there. Some interesting other data points. Publishers headquartered in China drove about a third of consumer mobile spending worldwide in 2022. Why is that important? It's part of these Chinese companies, game companies, not just looking outward to grow their business because they weren't able to grow it internally, but it also is because we have these studios in emerging markets, or what we considered emerging markets. I wouldn't say China's emerging anymore, it's here. But we have developers that have matured and gotten really good at making great games and the business models around those. Elden Rings is an example, right? That's a game that came out of Japan, and it was one of the biggest hits that we've had over the past year. So more local, going global in the future is kind of a theme here. All right, so we talked about the growth, the emerging markets. Now let's talk a little bit about consolidation phase. So, bless you. Consolidation phase, what is that? Well, that's something that happens in the later part of an industry's life cycle, usually when there's a bit of a bust, when companies start to acquire more companies and pursue growth through acquisition and consolidation because perhaps their core business model or existing model isn't generating the growth or revenue that they've been looking for. So this is important to note because it not only creates opportunities for people that might be looking for an exit or looking to partner up, right? But it also explains where the mindset is of a lot of the bigger companies. So big companies are getting bigger. And I'll show a little schema of the whole market and what that looks like. But before diving into it, let's just talk about last year. In Q1 to Q3 of last year, there were about 626 deals that were closed with an overall deal value of $51 billion. That goes up to about $125 billion if you include 10 deals that were not announced yet. And this is kind of a deal value that shrunk compared to 2021, and it shrunk even more compared to 2020. So we have a bit of a balance of power with some big players that are starting to really shift into acquisition mode. We have Microsoft, Take-Two, Embracer, EA, Tencent, Sony, and Ubisoft. These are big players that are really shifting their growth strategies to more of a consolidation mode. And there's all these companies that they've gobbled up, right? So it's just amazing to see this and to think about it. And it's something that when you're talking with these companies, it's just something good to keep in mind that there may be more opportunity now that they are looking to consolidate and grow through consolidation. What does that mean for your business, right? It may change a little bit some of the funding that comes from these folks, right? They may reduce funding on new projects because they want to redirect that to acquiring established companies or established projects. That's just one example, but again, keep this in mind and try to figure out what is the opportunity for your particular business when it comes to this. Recent gaming acquisitions, I think a lot of us have seen some of this data, but it just talks about the different deals that are out there. Activision Blizzard, biggest deal in history if it goes through, and it looks like it is on track to go through. It's overcome some recent hurdles. It's just really kind of boggles the mind, right, of what does it mean for our industry with these values of deals. But you need to keep this stuff in mind when you're signing deals with a company, with a publisher, or with a service provider. You maybe take a moment to ask yourself, if we're in this stage of consolidation, what could it mean for them and for our relationship, right? And make sure that you ask the right questions and just have knowledge before you go through with whatever you're going to be doing. The next piece is talking a little bit about how consolidation also helps to optimize costs. Remember I talked about margins. Companies are in a mode now where they want to protect their margins. Part of that is by doing consolidation to optimize costs. A lot of that means acquiring companies, merging the support networks that are within those companies, reducing the staff on that side. It can help mean bringing more resources to products that are or games that are actually working, right, to fuel them even more. And some things that I think we all know, developing AAA games now is significantly more expensive than it was 5 years ago. The average cost of developing and launching a AAA or an HD game has increased from around $50 to $60 million 5 years ago to $80 million or several hundred million today, right? So the costs to get to market have gone up as the quality of games have gone up, and that drives companies to figure out ways that they can optimize their costs, and part of that is through acquisition. So what else is going on? Disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence. Let's shift into the next trend that we're looking at. This is the iPhone moment of artificial intelligence. Remember I put that slide up earlier that took us through the different 15-year cycle where there was a bust with some sort of macroeconomic driver, and it was quickly followed by a new technology that launched a whole new cycle of boom. So we feel we're here now with AI, generative AI. It's just over the past few months exploded and is impacting us in ways that we may not even be thinking of yet. The way that we look at that is this is a tool, right? It's a productivity tool. It's not something to be sort of feared. It's something to be sort of used and worked into your own workflows. And this could be a boon not only for new types of productivity, it could be a boon for new types of games, new types of services. One of the things that we're looking at that we found from our research is that a number of companies are looking at generative AI and AI in general to help with that thorny problem that we've had for so long around the content treadmill, right? Of having to have big teams to if you're going to do live ops, to feed content on such a high frequency basis. We're seeing people now turning to generative AI as a potential solution, not for creating HD or hero assets, but for creating a lot of secondary and ancillary assets or quests or whatever that can really drive, or events that could drive the live ops business. Another thing that we're hearing from people when they're thinking of artificial intelligence and how does it go into their workflow is it obviously introduces a new skill set, right? Where you have to now be able to think about how to query properly, describe things to get a good result. And a lot of people are thinking, oh my gosh, that all falls on the current development teams, right? The current staff. One thing that we're hearing is some people are starting to think of it more of, okay, maybe these are new roles that are coming in. They're complementary to existing teams. And it's almost like bringing a band together, where you bring a band together of talented musicians. You might have one or two that know how to write songs, the rest don't, but when they come together, they're able to create something that is phenomenal. So similar with generative AI, team building, how teams are structured, is something I really encourage everyone to think about, and don't feel the pressure of the existing team having to do it all themselves. There may be those people that can come in and help form a new band that really help you use this tech and create something even better. So fear not disruption, right? So we talked a little bit about that. So what are the benefits of all of this? Well, it's faster, helps reduce costs. You can create more content, as I just mentioned, and it's more accessible. Something that I think is really cool that we haven't heard a lot of discussion around is how generative AI and new AI tools or components to existing tools actually increase accessibility and the ability for people who may not have previously been able to use these tools to use them. That then flows into, when you think of it from a global perspective, how there's not just from an accessibility standpoint, but a regional standpoint, how a whole host of people around the world who may not have been able to work with a mouse and keyboard to create assets can now engage and create assets through these AIs, right? Because they're able to describe through voice to text, whatever it might be. So again, an opportunity to open up a whole new segment, potentially a new workforce, which leads to more creativity, which just helps our industry as a whole. All right, the final thing that I'll talk about here quickly is cloud gaming. I think we all are familiar with cloud gaming. It's been a hot topic over the past few years. This is also sometimes called gaming on demand. And this is the idea that games are hosted somewhere on a cloud infrastructure and your users can just jump in from any device to access those and play them immediately without having to download anything, experience high HD, high definition content without having a powerful system to run that content. So why do we think it has potential? Well, if you look at some of the projections here, and I think 2025 is obviously an interesting, eye-opening projection, but if you look more at 2021 to 2022, where there's real data, you'll see that cloud gaming increased 84%, right, year over year. So while everybody was looking at Google Stadia and kind of that failing and, oh, cloud gaming isn't really doing anything, quietly in the background, the industry was growing. And the way that we look at it is, and it would encourage you to look at it, is don't think of it as a replacement. This isn't the next console, right? It's not gonna knock the PlayStation or the Xbox away, right? It's not gonna replace your high-powered PC gaming rig, right, if you're a PC gamer. But it is a new tool that can open up a new audience for you, right? The same way that smartphones accessed a new audience, online gaming accessed a new audience, we feel cloud gaming can be a tool, can be part of your overall model, your business model, to access a new audience and share some of the challenges that those players may have had. And whether it's emerging markets where people can't afford powerful machinery, whether it's the business model right around it, we feel that there's real potential there. So I kind of jumped into this slide already, but the new tools, this is all the stuff I just mentioned. It's a new tool, right? It gives you new opportunities to reach new audiences and larger audience. So we're seeing that one of the things that we felt was a little bit of a problem with cloud previously, it was kind of a all or nothing either or proposition, right? You got your game up on one platform, and that was meant to be a massive new revenue driver. Well, we think there's opportunity here now where even though a lot of cloud companies have gone away, there are a few that have stayed and grown. And we see there's an opportunity for you to work with all cloud companies to maximize for the user the best service for their region, for their device. So we're working on something that can bring all of that together, create a single landing point for your player, and behind the scenes, it's providing them the best cloud option. Because that was one of the challenges with cloud as well. If you were far away, someone was using Stadia and for their game, and the user was far away from any servers, edge server networks or anything like that, they may not have had a great experience. But there could have been a different cloud provider in their region that actually could have provided a better experience. So we feel there's a whole opportunity here, and again, it's an incremental addition to your business, not a replacement. So fast, customizable, cross-platform, and I'm just going to jump through this because we're getting near the end and I want to take a couple of questions. Most prevalent device, TVs are still out there for a lot of markets, so I think there's opportunity potentially for new games, new models that can be streamed or cloud streamed to TVs, and just cloud for everyone. So that's going to bring us to starting to wrap it up, but before we do, I want to make a little public service announcement because we are in some challenging times. We have a number of resources that I encourage people to look at, whether it's for funding, right? We can help connect people with different funding options and publishers. There's a great gentleman, Amir Satvat, who has created and maintains an ongoing list of companies that have open roles and connecting people who have lost their jobs with new opportunities. Really encourage you to find him on LinkedIn or check out his list. We have the link here. And then our own 80.lv is a site that we have which is focused on sort of art and content creators. We have a job board there. I'm not pitching it to sell. It's a resource that is out there for everybody to use. So tough times, great opportunities, but also want to provide some touch points to help people. And then finally, how do you stay relevant? How do you take these insights, these trends? How do you use them in your business? Well, of course, we have a handy little QR code that goes to a guide that you can download with even more advice, more insights, more data. And you can always talk with our team to learn even more that we don't share publicly on stage. But we're really here to help everybody grow their business. And I love this industry, so anything we can do to help all of you succeed, that's what we're here for. With that, I want to say thank you. And we have a couple of microphones. We've got maybe 7 minutes or so. I'd love to take a few questions. If I can't answer them, we have some Xsolla people in the room as well who might be able to answer. So I'll try my best. Yes.
Hello, thank you very much for the amazing talk. My question is, in 2024, the European Union is about to let other app stores be on like Apple, Google.
Yeah.
How do you think it's going to change the industry, mobile industry?
I think it's going to have a big impact on the mobile industry. I think there's two parts to that. There's the payments piece of it, right, of being able to access many, many more payment methods than are available within the app stores, and that's important. So we're all used to the app store having a handful of different payment options to choose from, but if you look globally, I mean, we work with over 700 different options. You go to emerging markets, a lot of players around the world aren't able to actually transact within the app store currently. So low-hanging fruit there, you'll have more payment options, which will allow more players to convert to spenders. But the other part of it that I'm curious to see coming out of these regulations is, will this give companies the ability to really message their players directly and say, just like we're seeing on our web shops, these limited time offers, these bundles, these high value packs, these special offers that are based upon behavioral data, right? Will you be able to utilize that information and offer those to players and drive them into the app store? And if you're able to, that's, as we've seen on the web shops, it's going to increase your revenue dramatically. The one thing that companies are also going to have to watch out for is what new work in the back room is going to be required. And what I mean by that is, if you're starting to go direct to your players, you now have to start thinking about things like taxes and VAT and regulations and compliance that the App Store handled for you. And that can be thorny to build up on your own, right? You want to dedicate your resources to making great games. So the third part is what happens with the app stores. Take a look, don't just look at the opportunity, but look at what is the opportunity cost that you have to address as well. And there's plenty of partners out there, such as ourselves, that can help with that. So, thank you. Yes?
Hello.
Hello.
My name is AD. I'm Creative Sync at SoundCloud. With all the change in industry with the cost of gaming and developing, like, where do you see music as a cut source of, like, in the budgeting of developing a game? How's it been sourced now, do you think, well, in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I was actually on the flight out here sitting next to somebody who is a music composer and creates music for games. And we were talking a lot about how he's using generative AI now even to help create his music. Is it something that will get cut? Look, been in the industry a long time. Audio is always the thing that gets squeezed, right? When people are looking at budgets and resources, and do we do it in-house? Do we buy some just stock stuff? But at the end of the day, the games that really succeed are creating custom audio and recognizing that it's important, not just the sound effects, but the music itself. I think just to put a thought out there, another way to look at the benefits of having custom music in your game. We know we didn't really talk about it, but influencers are becoming more and more important to user acquisition. So audio, sound, music is an important element for them when they're creating content. So if a game has a unique soundtrack, how can that be utilized beyond just the game itself? And I don't mean like, oh, we're going to sell the soundtrack, right? Okay. But how can we use it as part maybe of the marketing efforts that the team uses? So, one of the guards against the squeeze on resources around music is to get your partners to think about, hey, this is more than just a soundtrack in the game, right? This is a soundtrack for your game that you can deploy everywhere, right? And now maybe you're able to dip into, oh, well, we were going to have to create some music for this trailer. Well, we can take that money and combine it with the development budget money for music, and now you, as the creator, are able to, do your work and get properly compensated. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Your presentation had a heavy focus on mobile games.
Yeah.
I was curious if the data involved, is that also applicable to PC games as well, or is it a little bit different considering that you had that slide where there was a small growth in PC games?
Yeah. So is it comparable? Generally, yes. I mean, we really started working with mobile companies about 1.5 years ago through these web shops. Prior to that, our history had primarily been focused on PC games and just seeing phenomenal growth year over year with that direct-to-consumer strategy. So we work with a lot of companies who have their game up on Steam, on the Epic Store, but then they're also building their own web portal to distribute the games. And the common thread, whether it's mobile, PC-based, first, is that they're using these to build a more direct relationship with their players, and that leads to more engagement, higher sales. So the themes, right, are the same across. Specific data points may be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it is still a growth to the business overall. It's a net growth, which is great. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I think we have like 1.5 minutes left, so if there's nothing else, I'll hang out here for a little bit if anyone wants to talk one-on-one. Otherwise, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. I welcome feedback as well, and so thank you. Okay. Cool.